The stars had always been an ever-present backdrop to the lives of the various species that called the galaxy home. A vast expanse of cosmic dust, swirling nebulas, and distant suns, but for the last few centuries, one thing had stood out above all others: the dominance of the alien races. Humanity, once a proud and ambitious species, had become little more than a footnote in the history of the universe. It wasn't that they were extinct. Far from it. Humanity was alive and well, they were just dormant. It had all started with the Great Galactic War, a brutal conflict that had consumed the known universe for generations. The war had stretched across light years, with each race clawing for dominance, their ambitions unyielding. Humanity, eager to prove its worth among the stars, had joined the fray early on. But after years of fighting, with their forces pushed to the brink of annihilation, Earth's leaders made a fateful decision. The world's most brilliant minds had developed a plan, a last-ditch effort to survive, and perhaps even secure their place in the galaxy for the future. They constructed a fleet so advanced, so secretive, that no one outside of the highest echelons of Earth's military even knew of its existence. This fleet, however, was not meant to fight the war. No, it was a time capsule of sorts, one designed to preserve humanity's greatest weapon, itself. For hundreds of years, the fleet drifted in a state of hibernation, hidden in an isolated corner of the galaxy, awaiting a time when the war might end, or when Earth would need to reclaim its place in the universe. It was a long shot, but humanity had always been a long shot. No one knew exactly how long the fleet had been out there, and it didn't matter. Because the day it would awaken, no one could have predicted. It started with a flicker. Commander Lysandra Voss sat at the helm of the flagship Endeavour, her hands resting lightly on the controls as she monitored the systems. It was quiet, almost eerily so, in the command center. The fleet had been in stasis for so long that even the idea of noise felt like an alien concept to her. She had come to appreciate the silence, to take comfort in it. The calm before the storm. Her console beeped sharply. "Captain?" Lieutenant Kieran Zade's voice crackled over the comms. "We've detected a strange energy signature." Lysandra's brow furrowed, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the readings. A strange energy signature? That was a problem. The fleet hadn't encountered any kind of anomaly in over a century, not since they had gone into hibernation. This was something new. Something that hadn't been on their radar. "Location?" she asked, her tone crisp. "Coordinates locked." It's coming from Earth," Kieran replied. Lysandra's heart skipped a beat. Earth? The war had ended centuries ago, its ashes scattered across the stars. The remnants of humanity's great conflict had long since been swept under the rug. The fleet's purpose had been to wait until the galaxy was ready, until humanity's rightful place could be restored. But Earth, in all its ruin, was still there, still under the gravitational pull of the solar system, somewhere far below. "Bring it up on the main screen," Lysandra commanded, her voice sharp. The large holographic display flickered to life, and for a moment, all that could be seen was the image of Earth, hanging there in space, serene and quiet. The Earth they had known was long gone, replaced by something completely foreign. Cities had long since been consumed by the fires of war, and the once thriving atmosphere had decayed into a toxic haze. But the planet was still alive. It always had been. But what caught Lysandra's attention was not the planet itself, but the anomaly, a sudden and unexpected pulse of energy. It was faint, barely detectable, but unmistakable. A signal, of sorts. "What is it?" Kieran asked, his voice laced with confusion. "It's a call," Lysandra muttered under her breath. "A call for help. Or worse, a call to arms. A signal that could mean something entirely different." Her mind raced. If the fleet had been in hibernation for so long, could it be possible that humanity was returning? Perhaps they had awakened from their slumber, perhaps they had managed to rebuild after all these years. But if that were true, why was there still no communication? Why wasn't anyone on Earth answering the call? And why did the pulse feel off? "Is there any indication that the planet's been retaken?" she asked, turning to Kieran. No signs of civilization, Kieran replied, his fingers flying over the console as he scanned more data. The energy pulse doesn't match anything we've seen before. It's unlike anything the human fleet has been equipped with. It's almost as if it's an accident, a mistake, an anomaly in the data stream. Lysandra stared at the readings for a moment, her fingers twitching as she pondered. How long until we reach Earth? We'll be in range in approximately 6 hours, Kieran responded. 6 hours. The time it would take for them to reach Earth was far too long for Lysandra's liking, but she knew there was no turning back now. Whatever was happening, it was time to find out. Hours later, the fleet began its descent toward Earth. As they neared the planet's orbit, the tension was palpable. Every officer, every soldier aboard the fleet's ships, could sense something was wrong. The pulse of energy they had detected earlier had intensified. It was like a heartbeat, racing faster with every passing minute. "Commander, we're picking up strange transmissions," Kieran said, his voice tight. "We've traced them to Earth's old communications relay stations, but the signals, they don't match any known protocols." "Put it through," Lysandra ordered, and the communications screen flickered to life. What appeared was an ancient transmission, garbled and full of static, but still decipherable. "This is the United Earth Command Fleet," a voice rasped, and Lysandra felt her blood freeze. We're awake. The fleet, we." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. The message had come from Earth. But it didn't feel right. Something was wrong. There was no telling what had happened to the people who sent it or why it had taken this long for it to reach them. The question was simple: what was it they had awakened? "Ready the boarding parties," Lysandra said, her voice calm despite the chaos brewing in her chest. "We're going down there." As the fleet moved closer to the planet, preparing to land and investigate the source of the anomaly, Lysandra couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, something that would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. The war had been a long time ago, but the pieces were starting to fall into place, and it was clear that they were not the only ones to have survived. What awaited them on Earth was a mystery, but Lysandra was ready to face it head-on. She just hoped the people of the fleet hadn't forgotten the meaning of their mission. The galaxy may have forgotten them, but humanity was about to make its return, and it was going to be a force to be reckoned with. The fleet began its final descent toward Earth, and Lysandra could only wonder what awaited them below. The stars above felt distant now, and Earth was suddenly very close. It was time to see what the world had become. And if it was going to take back its place among the stars. The landing craft touched down with a soft jolt, the sound of metal scraping against the Earth's atmosphere a stark reminder of how long humanity had been absent from its home planet. The fleet had set up a perimeter around the landing zone, a wide, barren stretch of land. For miles, the only sign of life was the occasional flicker of distant fires or the odd, twisted wreckage of old, forgotten technology. The remnants of a war fought long ago, long before Lysandra and her crew had even been born. Lysandra stood in the command center, watching the feeds from the ground team as they made their way through the barren landscape. The silence was oppressive, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Every few minutes, Kieran would glance up from his terminal, his face growing more and more tense. "We've got nothing," he muttered, his voice thick with frustration. "No signs of life. Nothing but ruins. It's like the entire world's been abandoned for centuries." "Keep searching," Lysandra said sharply. "This planet hasn't been abandoned. Not for one moment." The words felt empty in her own ears, though. She knew, deep down, that something had happened. The pulse they'd traced back to Earth had been undeniable, but so far, nothing on the ground supported the idea that humanity had truly risen from the ashes. The message they'd intercepted was clear: they were awake. But where were they? The team on the ground continued to send back empty reports. As time wore on, Lysandra's patience began to fray. She paced back and forth in the command center, her boots echoing against the polished floor. The sense of dread was growing, creeping in with each passing minute. There were too many unknowns. Too many strange signals. and the silence from the planet was starting to feel suffocating. Finally, after hours of fruitless searching, the comms officer spoke up. "Commander, you need to see this." Lysandra froze in place. "What is it?" "Anomaly detected near the old United Earth Command headquarters," the officer said, her fingers flying over the controls. "We're picking up another pulse. Stronger than before." Lysandra's heart skipped a beat. She could hear the faint crackle of static through the speakers. It was unmistakable. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. Someone, or something, was trying to make contact. "Bring it up," Lysandra ordered, her voice now steady but filled with anticipation. The holographic screen flickered and then resolved into a patchy image of a large, underground facility. The structure was intact, which, to Lysandra's surprise, seemed almost impossible. The surface of Earth had been scarred by warfare for centuries, and anything of this size should have long since decayed. But here it was, still standing, hidden beneath layers of dirt and rubble. The transmission was coming from there. Then the voice crackled through again, thin and strained. "This is Commander Rhiannon Mathis of the United Earth Command Fleet. We've awakened. We need help." Lysandra's pulse quickened. "Commander Mathis? Could it be possible?" The commander sounded desperate, as if she was barely holding it together. But the most chilling part? The background noise was unmistakable. There were echoes of a distant battle, the sound of weapons fire, and the low hum of technology that was both familiar and alien. Something was terribly wrong. "Commander?" Lysandra spoke into the comms, her voice cutting through the static. "Commander Mathis, do you copy?" The transmission flickered again, and a face appeared on the screen. It was a woman, with short-cropped hair and dark eyes that betrayed an exhaustion beyond measure. Her uniform was a patchwork of older and newer materials, but what struck Lysandra most was the look of disbelief on the woman's face. You're alive?" Commander Mathis's voice cracked. "I thought we were the last ones." Lysandra felt a shiver run down her spine. The weight of the moment was beginning to sink in. Humanity had survived. They were still here, deep beneath the surface of the planet. But why had they remained hidden? And what was going on in that underground facility? "Commander Mathis, what's going on down there?" Lysandra asked. "What happened to the rest of the fleet?" The other woman paused, her gaze flicking away from the screen for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "The war, it didn't end like they told you. We thought we were safe. But we were wrong. We've been fighting, still fighting, in the dark. There are things down here. Things we never imagined could survive. We awakened something, and now we're paying the price." Lysandra's heart raced. "What did you awaken?" The transmission cut out, leaving Lysandra in stunned silence. For a moment, no one moved. The words hung in the air like a thick fog, heavy with the implications of what they might mean. Kieran turned toward Lysandra. "Commander, we need to go in. We can't wait. If there are still survivors down there." "I know," Lysandra interrupted, her mind already working through the possibilities. She had to get to the heart of this, to understand what was happening beneath Earth's surface. If there were still survivors, they had to be found. And if they were facing something they didn't understand, well, that was a problem. A big one. "We're preparing a landing party," Lysandra said firmly. "Kieran, assemble a team. We're going in." The landing craft descended into the ruins of the old United Earth Command facility, cutting through the thick layers of ash and rubble that had accumulated over the years. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a smell that seemed to cling to everything. Even the light from the craft's landing lamps struggled to pierce the darkness of the facility's depths. As the doors hissed open, the landing party stepped out into the dimly lit corridor. Lysandra led the group, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The walls were covered in strange symbols, some of them unfamiliar, others recognizable as old military insignias. There was something deeply unsettling about the place, an eerie stillness that suggested time had stopped here long ago. The team moved cautiously, weapons at the ready. They encountered no resistance as they moved deeper into the facility, but the silence was deafening. The deeper they went, the more it felt like they were walking through a forgotten tomb. Eventually, they reached a central chamber, a vast room filled with old machinery. The hum of power was faint, but it was enough to tell Lysandra that the facility's systems were still operational. But that didn't explain the feeling of foreboding in the air. It wasn't until they reached the core of the facility that they found it, the source of the pulses. There, in the center of the room, was a large, strange device, one that had no place in any of the human technologies Lysandra knew. It was a massive, intricate structure, covered in glowing symbols and pulsing with energy. It was as if the device was alive. Lysandra approached the machine cautiously. "What is this?" Commander Mathis's voice crackled through their comms once more, but this time, her tone was filled with dread. "It's not just a machine," she said, her voice tight with fear. "It's a trap. And we've triggered it. It's been waiting. And now it's awake." The room suddenly shook as the ground beneath them began to tremble. Lysandra's heart leapt in her chest. And then, from the darkness beyond the machine, something moved. Something that wasn't human. The tremor underfoot intensified, a low, rumbling growl that sent shockwaves through the facility. The lights flickered, casting long, jagged shadows across the walls. Lysandra's pulse quickened, her hand instinctively gripping the hilt of her weapon. Whatever was happening, whatever had been triggered by that machine, it was not a good sign. The air itself felt charged, thick with a palpable sense of danger. "Commander, stay alert," Kieran said, his voice low but tense. He was scanning the surrounding area, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. "Whatever it is, it's not human." Lysandra nodded, though she felt her heart pounding in her chest. The words haunted her, "It's not human." What could have survived for so long beneath the surface of the planet? What kind of creature had been hiding in the darkness all these years? The sound of scraping metal reverberated through the chamber. The machine before them hummed, a deep, resonating noise that seemed to vibrate in the very bones of the team. The symbols on its surface flashed brightly, and Lysandra realized with a start that they weren't just glowing. They were shifting, moving like liquid light, and as they did, they revealed something far more terrifying than any alien species they had encountered before. It was a symbol, a creature's mark, something ancient, something that shouldn't have existed in this galaxy. "Commander," one of the soldiers whispered urgently, "look." From the depths of the shadows beyond the machine, the air rippled. A figure emerged slowly, its form indistinct at first, blending with the darkness, but then it stepped into the dim light. It was humanoid in shape, but it wasn't human. It was tall, nearly 8 feet in height, with a skeletal frame covered in a strange, iridescent exoskeleton. Its skin shimmered like polished obsidian, and its face, or what might have once been a face, was an unsettling mask of jagged angles and deep, hollow eyes. The creature's body was adorned with strange markings, similar to those on the machine. It was as if it had been waiting for this moment. Lysandra's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the markings. There were whispers of them in the old texts, the ones that spoke of the ancient war, the ones that had been buried and forgotten. It was the signature of a species long thought to be extinct, an ancient race known as the Sterii. A race that had waged war across the stars, a species so dangerous that the galaxy had locked away all records of them, as if the very mention of their name might summon them back into existence. Well, what do we have here?" the creature rasped, its voice a low, guttural growl that sent chills down Lysandra's spine. "Survivors, I see. How quaint." Lysandra steadied herself, her mind racing. She had read about the Sterii in the oldest of texts. They were a race of conquerors, hunters, and manipulators, beings that had once dominated the galaxy, only to vanish as mysteriously as they had appeared. Until now. "Who are you?" Lysandra demanded, her voice unwavering despite the cold fear gripping her insides. "What have you done?" The creature tilted its head, as if considering her words. "What have we done?" "We? Oh, no, human. You've awakened us. The creature's voice was smooth, almost hypnotic, as if it was savoring each word. You see, we've been waiting. Waiting for the moment to return. The moment when the galaxy would be weak. And now, thanks to your meddling, that moment has come. Lyssandra's eyes darted to the machine, now glowing brighter, its energy building to an almost unbearable level. The machine, she asked, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to come together. This thing is, what? A beacon? A beacon? The creature's laugh echoed through the chamber, dark and mocking. No, it is not a beacon. It is a prison, you fool. And you've just broken it wide open. Before Lysandra could respond, the creature raised its hand, and the ground trembled once more. From the shadows, more figures began to emerge, each one more horrifying than the last. Their forms were alien and grotesque, towering over the humans like ancient, vengeful gods. Their eyes were empty voids, and their movements were erratic, like the remnants of long-dead creatures. Some were hunched and skeletal, while others were broad and muscular, covered in thick, chitinous armor. There were more than Lysandra could count, and they were closing in. We were sealed away, the first Sterii continued, its voice growing more impatient. But now we are free. And we will take what is rightfully ours. The galaxy will burn, human. And you will not stop us. Lysandra's mind raced. She was outnumbered, outmatched, and facing an enemy unlike anything she had ever encountered. The situation was dire, but she couldn't afford to let fear take over. She had to think. Had to act. Fall back. Lysandra ordered, her voice commanding despite the chaos unfolding around her. We need to regroup. Get to the extraction point, now. The soldiers immediately began to move, but it was clear that the Sterii were faster, their reflexes sharp and inhuman. They leaped forward with terrifying speed, cutting off the exits and forcing the humans back into the chamber. Lysandra took a step forward, her weapon drawn. Get the others out of here, she said to Kieran, her eyes locked on the advancing Sterii. I'll hold them off. What are you talking about? Kieran snapped, his eyes wide with disbelief. We can't just. There's no choice, Lysandra said, cutting him off. I'll buy you time. Now go. Kieran hesitated for a moment, but he knew there was no arguing with her. He nodded, his face set in grim determination, and motioned for the team to retreat. They had no time to waste. Lysandra faced the Sterii, her weapon raised, ready to make a stand. The first of the creatures lunged at her with a horrifying screech, its claws extended, sharp and deadly. But Lysandra was faster. She fired, the blast striking the creature square in the chest. It reeled back, but it wasn't enough to stop it. The Sterii hissed in anger and charged again. Lysandra fired again, and again, but it was clear that no matter how many she took down, there were more. The room seemed to swell with the creature's presence, their unnatural movements, their haunting growls. Each time she shot, another Sterii took its place. They were endless, relentless. She needed a plan, and she needed it fast. But there was only one thing she knew for sure, she wasn't going to let them take Earth without a fight. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of light erupted from behind her. The extraction team had activated a secondary set of explosives they had planted earlier. The Sterii were distracted, and Lysandra took the opening to fire another barrage, pushing through the waves of enemy forces. The ground began to shake again, harder this time, as the explosion tore through the facility's core. The Sterii staggered, disoriented, but Lysandra wasn't finished yet. She ran toward the machine, eyes burning with determination. If she could disable it, if she could stop whatever it was doing, maybe, just maybe, the Sterii would be forced back into the depths of the planet from which they came. But the Sterii were closing in fast, and Lysandra knew this battle was far from over. The ground beneath Lysandra's feet buckled once more, and the hum of the machine intensified, thrumming like a heartbeat, pushing waves of oppressive energy through the chamber. The air was thick with tension, heavy with the weight of a battle that had just begun, but whose end was nowhere in sight. The Sterii were everywhere, circling like sharks, each one seemingly faster and more lethal than the last. Lysandra could feel her body responding to the adrenaline coursing through her veins, each movement sharp, deliberate, and calculated. But the truth was undeniable, this wasn't a battle they could win through sheer force. She had to find a way to shut down the machine. If she didn't, the Sterii would tear through the fleet and humanity's last hope would be crushed. She sprinted toward the heart of the room, where the alien machine loomed, its pulsating core radiating an eerie, unnatural glow. The battle raged on behind her, her team still fighting valiantly, but she knew they couldn't hold out forever. The first Sterii attacked again, its massive form moving faster than she could react. Its clawed hand lashed out with terrifying precision, but Lysandra was ready. With a swift motion, she dove sideways, narrowly avoiding the strike. She shot at the creature's chest, the blast sending it stumbling back, but it recovered quickly. They were like shadows, relentless, merciless, and nearly impossible to stop. "You can't escape," the creature's voice snarled, its deep, guttural tone laced with contempt. "There is no escape, human." Lysandra's pulse was pounding in her ears as she reached the machine, fingers scrambling to find any weak points, any exposed wiring that might give her access to its core. The symbols on the surface of the machine had shifted, glowing brighter with each passing second. It was feeding off the energy, feeding off the battle, the fear. She yanked a panel open, revealing a complex array of cables, energy conduits, and unknown symbols. Her breath was ragged as she scanned the tangled mess of alien technology. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The interface was not designed for human hands. It was alien in every sense of the word. But Lysandra wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "Commander." Kieran's voice echoed from behind her. "We can't hold them off for much longer. We need to go, now." She didn't look back, didn't hesitate. "Keep them busy." "I'm almost there." The Sterii were closing in again, faster now, sensing her weakness. They moved in a blur, their speed overwhelming, and for a moment, Lysandra wondered if this was how it would end. Alone. The machine would tear open a hole in reality, and the Sterii would rain down on humanity with an unstoppable vengeance. Then, in the midst of the chaos, something inside Lysandra clicked. She remembered something. A thought. A vague memory from the archives. A scrap of data, buried deep in the old human records. The machine, this prison, this ancient thing, it was built by the Sterii to contain them. But it wasn't just a prison. It was a catalyst. The very core of it was designed to amplify energy, to break through barriers. If she could reverse its flow, if she could destabilize its core. "Lysandra, don't do it." Kieran shouted again, his voice full of panic. But Lysandra was already far beyond that. She had a plan. With trembling hands, she connected two wires together, igniting a sudden surge of electricity. The walls of the room cracked, and the Sterii howled in fury as they realized what she was doing. Lysandra's heart raced as she punched in a series of commands on the glowing console. The symbols shifted, twisting, as the machine responded, its pulse rising higher, more erratic, now feeding off the energy she was redirecting. She could feel it now, the pressure, the pull of the machine, the shifting forces threatening to tear her apart. Sweat poured down her face as she pressed every button, pulled every lever with calculated precision. The core of the machine flared up, lighting the entire room with a brilliant, blinding glow. Then, there was a moment of silence. A stillness that felt as if the universe itself had held its breath. And then, with a deafening roar, the machine detonated. The explosion didn't come in the way she'd expected. There was no fire, no blast of physical energy. Instead, the explosion was a wave of pure energy, cascading outward in all directions. It surged through the chamber, ripping apart the floor, the walls, the very fabric of the Sterii forces themselves. The creatures screamed, their forms dissolving into the light. The very energy that had once held them in check had now become their undoing. Their bodies flickered, distorted, then shattered as the energy tore them apart from the inside out. Lysandra was thrown backward by the shockwave, slamming into the floor with a sickening crunch. For a moment, everything went dark. When Lysandra regained consciousness, the world around her was eerily quiet. The dim, pulsating glow of the machine was gone. The sterei had vanished, disintegrated by the very force they had unleashed. Lysandra's head swam as she struggled to sit up. Pain lanced through her body, but she ignored it. Her eyes flicked around the room, half expecting to see the sterei reforming in the darkness. But there was nothing. Just the remnants of the machine, now a heap of broken, alien technology. She was alive. They were alive. Slowly, she pushed herself to her feet, her limbs heavy, but her spirit unbroken. The battle was over. The sterei were gone. The galaxy, or at least Earth, had been saved. Kieran and the others came into view, their faces a mix of exhaustion, awe, and relief. They had survived. "You did it," Kieran said, his voice soft with disbelief. He gave her a wry smile. "I thought you were crazy for a second, you know." Lysandra chuckled weakly, rubbing her head. "Yeah, I thought I might be too. But it worked." "We're going to need a hell of a story for this one," Kieran added. She looked around at the team, their faces grim but victorious. Earth was scarred, and the sterei would remain a shadow in the history books. But the war was over. Humanity had endured. And more than that, they had shown that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, the will to fight, to survive, was humanity's greatest strength. Against all odds, they had prevailed. "You're right," Lysandra said, a grin tugging at the corner of her mouth. "We've got one hell of a story to tell." And as the remnants of the machine glowed faintly in the distance, Lysandra knew the fight wasn't just about the present. It was about the future that humanity would build, not in fear, but in strength, resilience, and the indomitable will to survive.